Okay, looks like Jerry's ready to call the meeting.
Okay, we have a call to order of the Bartlett Economic Development Commission for the February 10th meeting. May we have a roll call?
Jerry Cabasco,
Here.
Kirsten Erickson,
Here.
Robert Perry, Tracy Smadilla,
Here.
Nanette Gutenkoff, Joel Laporte, Adam Lewinsky,
Here.
Stephanie Ganzi,
Here.
Michelle Hughes.
Okay, we have a quorum, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which would be approval of the previous meeting minutes from January 13th, 2020. Have any discussion? If not, do we have a motion to approve?
I motion we approve the meeting notes from January 13th.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Move on to the next.
I'm
Agenda item?
abstaining.
You want to add something,
Yes,
Tracy?
I was
Okay.
out of the meeting, and I was not able to access these online.
Got it.
Thanks.
Okay, next agenda item would be public comments. We have 3 people in the audience. Anybody have a comment to make? Okay, apparently there are no public comments tonight, so we'll move on to item number 5, interactive map-based dining map.
Thank you, Jerry. For this one, I'm going to give just a quick intro and then turn it over to my friend and colleague, Stephen Spradling, the GIS specialist for the village. The quick background on this is way back about 10 years ago or so on the EDC, and 2 of you were around the EDC at that time. And just like we do now, we strategize of ways to better market and promote and support new and existing businesses. And back then, there was a lot of turnover in the businesses in general throughout the village, and most specifically with a lot of restaurants. And at that time, what we did, we started producing a print dining guide. Thank you, Stephen, for bringing one. I meant to. Stephen brought one. So that's the summer 2019 version. And I have about 9 prior versions in a big, big notebook that I keep full of my notes and amendments and changes. As you might imagine, the 2019 dining guide looks quite a bit different than the 2010. As a matter of fact, we never had the same list of businesses 2 years in a row in the dining guide. So a few years ago, when we started moving towards more internet-based and web-based digital marketing, of course, that's something that's more readily updated than something that you print 1,000 of and you distribute all over the town, and then 1 or 2 months later something opens or something closes. So Stephen here has been great to work with, not only on the dining guide, but pretty much anytime we need some kind of mapping done to provide to developers. He's kind of like Johnny on the spot with that, and always helps with that. So it's not all, I want to let Stephen present it again, because he's the brains and the tech savvy behind this web-based dining guide that was modified even as recently as today. Also, want to mention, don't want to embarrass him, but he just got back from his honeymoon. So he came back today, and he's here at the EDC tonight to present to you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you. So to get to the online dining guide, we've got links to our maps page right here on the front page of the Bartlett website. So right on there, we've got our PDF maps. So those are static maps like our zoning map or our subdivisions maps. And then we have our interactive quick maps, which are the maps that we're currently been expanding on and where the dining guide resides. So if we go in here, we've got the Bartlett restaurant map. And so it opens up to kind of a intro page on here that just kind of explains the app, saying it's an interactive app, allows you to click on each marker symbol to view details about different restaurants. And then we've got a list of all the current restaurants across the bottom that you can kind of scroll across and get any information for any of them. So, you know, if you're looking at the Dogfather, for instance, just a quick description of the restaurant. Their hours is, you know, based on what we can find on their website, their contact information, where they're located, also zooms to their location on the map. So if you went to, you know, Delicious, it would kind of zoom into their area here in the streets of Bartlett. Go back to Dogfather, it zooms to their area there at Apple Valley and 59. And then in each of them, we've got their link to their website. Dogfather goes to their Facebook page, and this is kind of, you know, where any resident would go to view the information of whatever specials they have going on or whatever. And we try and keep this updated as soon as I get the information. I can hop on here and add a point, remove a point, change their hours, kind of configure this, you know, to show the most up-to-date information compared to printout that, you know, is from summer 2019, for instance. We're always looking for any feedback or anything, if you guys have any suggestions or...
So does it have to be like specifically a restaurant? Like what about something like Gambits that has food but is a lot like gaming?
Yeah, so we've started adding those in. So we've got Gambits, we've got, Gambits is the one down here. We've got Olivia's, we've got, we're gonna add May's on there.
There's
Yeah.
Stella's and Betty's Bistro and all those.
So basically anything that allows you to buy food and either eat there or carry out. So we've included the Polish Deli up there at 59 and Stearns. That was one that wasn't ever in the dining guide before. And then there was a couple of other restaurants that we found that had either takeout food or dine-in options that we wanted to add on to there.
So my question, Stephen, is obviously on this page it shows the Village of Bartlett Dining Guide, but if you go back and you've got the little link that kind of takes you to even if you go back even further, back one more. So we've got the quick interactive maps. Does it actually show in the ready-to-print PDF maps or the interactive maps, does it indicate that if you click here, you'll get to a dining guide?
No, I don't believe that's listed in there.
Because if I'm at the website, I'm not necessarily going to think if I click on interactive quick maps that it'll take me to dining. So I think that the page that particular link takes you to, where you've got the options for the different things, we may be better served if those thumbnails for those maps are actually on that particular page prior.
That's definitely a fantastic suggestion. I was just reading here, they have updated it to include what maps are on that page.
Right.
And it says to click down here, but I agree that thumbnail could be either updated to list all of or, you know, kind of show a preview of all the maps or
Right.
even have them located on this page directly.
Great, thank you, appreciate that.
There's no link or anything here. It just says, click on the map image below to choose and view.
Sidebar.
Yeah, side,
this one?
drop down, yeah.
So if you click on restaurants up there, then it goes to, this is kind of a static view, listing out all of their contact information and website. And then we have a link to the interactive map here that takes you directly to that dining guide page, or to the interactive maps page where you can find the restaurant and other.
I feel like more visual buttons straight to it would be helpful.
Yeah, if we can I like the idea of having a link to the restaurant map, maybe kind of highlighted on the top of this page possibly.
Yeah. I also think that it should just not be just restaurants, but like things to do in Bartlett. A lot of times when you look at other villages, you're looking at things to do if you're going to visit a specific place. And you're not necessarily thinking about necessarily maybe eating there, but it's like restaurants and things to do. And maybe since this is such a quick thing that you can change and update so fast, maybe this is a great place that we go ahead and we allow some of those things that are happening within the village to also be, you know, restaurants and things to do in the village, so that we're really kind of driving a little bit more clicks going there.
Yeah, that would definitely be something we could add on there. my concern with that is getting the information on our side.
That was my next
Somebody's doing a concert or something.
Right.
And they have to let us know, otherwise we'll have to be kind of digging through all of those Facebook pages or, you know, newspaper posts or wherever to get that information.
Do you guys ever give the restaurants information about how often they've been clicked on from the village's site or anything?
We have not.
Yeah, this has just recently been improved within the last
Right.
week or two. So we're not at the point yet, I mean, this will be like something that we promote through some of our media channels, so we do want to start driving more people to it. But at this point, it's not necessarily the first place people go when they're looking for a restaurant to a village website, but we want to have that on there for them. Like, we've been doing, like I said, the print dining guide for a long time.
Right.
This is like a more dynamic, interactive, look at it on your phone type of situation. So we do want to promote it and have more views for sure.
Well, I'm thinking too, and I'm just going to piggyback off of what Commissioner Kirsten said. We've used a marketing tagline for Shop, Dine, Play, and I've seen that on the banners that are up and down Bartlett Road. Perhaps that's how this particular segment of the site be rebranded, is for Shop, Dine, and Play, in that it really kind of gives you that's precisely it. And I think that would be attractive to perhaps people that might even consider moving to Bartlett as well, if they've got a greater idea of the abundance of not just dining opportunities, but again, activities, and again, local shopping. I think particularly since there is, I think, probably a more distinct and heightened awareness of the necessity to support local merchants rather than, mitigating the Amazon effect, basically.
I think it's good to, like you said, like to keep like the branding to like the same language.
Same message.
Right.
Consistent. Yeah, I think that it's something that you could really kind of continue to move on with and maybe give the businesses a semi-annual update of, this is how we're helping drive traffic to you, but you've got to keep us up to date on your specials, your hours, your changes, your stuff, because we can't, we're helping you get clicks, and here's your data, but you've got to keep us up to date, and here's an easy way of emailing it into the village so that you can quickly change it. Because, as you said, you could just do this on the fly and update it immediately. But it's only as good as the content that they're willing to give you, and I'm sure Nan would be willing to, with the chamber, encourage people to update that information and keep it as up to date as possible.
I would agree. Some of the restaurant owners, just in our normal course of business, we talk to every week or every month, and then others we haven't heard from for years. We reach out to them occasionally for whatever reason, but that's true. We do our best to keep everything up to date, but you're right, sometimes we don't hear about the latest and greatest things.
Actually, earlier today, I think the Gambits was closed.
I mean, I think Scott's going to take this. I think it was temporarily closed in their case. I don't know if that one is a permanent issue or not at this point.
The last correspondence I had with the owner, they said they had a personal family issue. I said, that's none of my business. I wish you well. However, your business is my business, so if you could just keep us updated on that, we'd appreciate it. And they said, will do. That was a couple days ago. I'll give them some space if they've got some family issues, certainly, but I'll check in on them again in a week or so.
Right, we're not going to remove them from this yet, but keep our eyes on it.
I got a suggestion. Going through the website on the mobile view here, you might want to have it be more than 20 things showing, because when somebody looks at it, they're not going to want to, they'll never click next. If you actually get them to this page, I think that's the real challenge. But yeah, I'd definitely list them all, because if I'm looking for a place to eat and that's the goal, I'd never go to next. Just a personal suggestion, I don't know.
It's hard when we have nearly 60 restaurants, so we're trying to, balance accessibility with, covering the run.
Yeah, have you guys, I mean, why not take this a step further? And I'm sure there's some mobile app framework of some sort where you have all this information.
We're working on a whole revamp of our whole entire website. We're in the middle of that, and along with that comes a better mobile framework, so I think you'll see it a little better. We didn't get the Cadillac plan, because we're working within the confines of the taxpayers, but it's going to be a much better website with better navigation and a friendlier mobile framework that I think you'll probably see, the next couple months.
Have you guys thought about maybe bringing some of the, or sending out an invitation to some of these businesses and saying, you know, if you'd like to give us some information, we want to expand this program, we want to see what you're looking for, and see if some of them will be willing to come forward and kind of sit on a panel and talk to you about ways and suggestions that they have that perhaps could improve it as well. And kind of put some onus and ownership back on some of these restaurants of kind of maybe driving some of it themselves as well.
I mean, I'll answer that. So I would say, I would have to ballpark that in the last 4 weeks, and I shouldn't just say me, between myself and Scott, we've probably engaged with at least 15 of the local restaurants, as well as other potential new restaurants. You know, it sounds like a little joke I make, but they don't call you to say, hey, things are going so great. So a lot of times when they call, there's some type of issue or challenge that they're facing. We always do our best to help serve them within the confines of what we can do, you know, from a village standpoint, which isn't everything, but it's helping them in marketing, basically, in social media. When you see those, if you look at Discover Bartlett and you see a video promoting a restaurant, usually it's somebody that asked us for some help in marketing, so we do, that's one of our things we offer. The dining guide is another one. We've done cable TV ads, you know, some of you have seen, I've shown you the cable TV ads. We do Dine in Bartlett. We didn't do that specific one last year, but that's another one we can do this year. The restaurants that we feature are, for the most part, are always very grateful. They're very happy to see that. So my answer to that is we're constantly engaging with them. I'm kind of taking out the fast food people out of the equation, and then there's some businesses that just kind of keep to themselves and do well year after year after year. But for most of the others, we're in some type of communication with them on a fairly regular basis. There's probably at least 3, possibly 4 restaurants right now looking at doing some type of project, possibly through the beta program. So we're in communication with a lot of them.
Okay, if there's no more questions, that appears to end our discussion on the dining map. Next item agenda would be a review of the video gaming revenues report. You want to lead us through that, Tony?
You can boogie in. Are you gonna, do you want to operate the, okay. Give us a second here. Okay. So, again, I had mentioned speaking with some of the restaurants about the beta program for new businesses and expanding businesses. And as you folks know, that program is essentially funding through the village's share of the video gaming revenues. I know you all see Joey here working with Scott and myself every month at the meetings, and he's kind of a jack of all trades for the village. One of the things that he does on a monthly basis for everybody at the village, administration, all the elected officials, is he tracks the video gaming numbers, specifically the village portion, business by business, game by game, in comparison with other surrounding communities. For those of you, again, who were on the EDC back when gaming came to the state back in 2012, you may recall the EDC hosted about 4 public hearings in a row, listening to comments from people on both sides, business owners who wanted it, some residents and groups who didn't want it. Ultimately, the village board decided to allow it, primarily in support of the existing businesses. Some of them were struggling at the time and looked at this as another great revenue stream, as it has proven to be. And again, here is Joey Dienberg here to further flush out some of these numbers for you folks and then answer your questions about it.
Thank you, Tony. So as Tony mentioned, we've had video gaming here in Bartlett since November of 2012. Right now, we currently have 17 businesses that do have gaming. If you see there in the memo, at the moment there are 79 terminals here in town. That number changes just about every single month. When I'm looking at the report, sometimes there's a machine added and a machine taken away. If you may have heard, the state did just up that limit to 6, and I did check on that. We do have quite a few establishments that will be adding that 6th machine. Right now, I believe they have them. It's just whether or not whenever the state does turn those machines on once everything is in place. So that will be coming soon as well. And as you can see kind of throughout here, you can see a little bit of the breakdown between the many different businesses. I won't get into every single one, but there is quite, as you can see, the different revenue that does come in through there. One thing that I did want to highlight that isn't necessarily in this, I was kind of looking through my other spreadsheet that I work with. So here's the breakdown that I work on what I have every month that I update as we go. And it breaks down each individual restaurant and parlor as the money comes in each month. And one category that is also very good to see is the average monthly business revenue. This wasn't included in that last report that's in the packet. So you can see this is the money that each individual business gets from the money that is put into the machines. So you can see that that's quite a good amount for most of them, where they're getting 35%, where the village is only getting 5%. And this is of the total winnings that the machine takes in. So you can see the ones that I have highlighted here, just to see the impact that it does make on some of our smaller restaurants, like such as O'Hare's, who's bringing in about $4,600, which is a nice boost for a restaurant like that can get you through some of those harder times. Pasta Mia brings in $3,000. Wheaties bring in about $6,500. So it is really interesting, I think, to look at these every month just to see how each individual business is doing, and then also how the village is pulling it in. We look at this during budgeting time when the BETA budget is being set. It lines up pretty closely to this to reflect that.
And one thing that Joey put down there, if you notice, is municipalities and the number of gaming terminals that each municipality has. You hear a lot that on the streets that Bartlett's plagued with video games, and whether you agree with gaming or not, whether you agree with terminals or not, in comparison to our other communities, we're very much in the median.
And that's kind of what I wanted to share at this point. I'm sure some of you have had a chance to look through the packet and might have some questions, and at that point, I'll open up the questions.
I have a question, Joe, and thank you for putting this together. I think it's pretty telling that there are certain places that are doing better than others. And I think that, for restaurants that are truly restaurants, I think about TL's as being an example. You can see that they've got a very, very low margin of revenue as it would probably relate to their total food and beverage. So I'm very happy that gaming has not deterred their primary business. I don't see Moretti's on this. Have you bundled
Yeah, Moretti.
Moretti's under Lucky Star?
Yeah, so I go by the LLC that I get from the state report. So yes, the Cadillac, yeah, Lucky Star Cadillac Ranch, that is.
Isn't that Ace? Isn't the parent Ace? Ace Entertainment?
It is.
Okay. So doesn't Lucky Star itself, and I haven't been in Lucky Star, but doesn't Lucky Star, they're run as a separate business from Moretti's, correct? And don't they have their own terminals in Lucky Star? And then you've got,
From the state report that I pull, these are the only places that are on there each month. And the state completely operates those machines, so.
We'll have to check on that, but I'm pretty sure that they operate under the LLC of Lucky Star when it comes to their gaming, but we can check on that and send it to you.
It's public information. There's a website,
yeah.
Illinois Gaming Commission. All this information's out there, so there's no secrets.
And this is the most up-to-date that we have. I checked this afternoon about 4:30 to see if they did have January's numbers up yet, and they did not yet, so this is the most up-to-date information we have. Thank you.
Tony, when you could just have contact with the restaurant owners and everything, as we previously talked about, I remember being on the board in 2012 when we looked at this and everything, and we decided to say, this is something that should be looked at. Each business should decide what they want to do themselves. What are they saying about it? Do they see this as, do they go look at the state information to see how they rank against other competitors in the village and kind of make some plans?
Occasionally they do. Honestly, the ones that focus more on gaming, they're always looking at it. They look at it even more than we do. And then I like what Joey said, because that's accurate. Some of the businesses you see on there that might get 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 a month, is really helping to sustain them. Sure. More so than to say, well, Bannerman's or McMay's or something's turning into a video gambling place. That's really not the case with them. It's something that they make available. I've never spoken with a restaurant owner that's not happy to have that extra revenue that helps them get through some of those leaner times. It's not enough anymore just to have games that you'll be, guaranteed success, but it's something that helps. When I talk about generally, every single year for 10 years, I've done the dining guide, and I've looked at it every year since then, and I can tell you, I'm assuming we'll talk about Bartlett Tap a little bit, but there's been far lower turnover over the past few years than there used to be. It used to be like 6 or 8 restaurants a year. Last year, for the print dining guide, was almost like the same all year, and we still have more coming soon. As Joey's pointing out, he's showing some of the ones that formerly had it, but even just looking at it quickly, you can see that, where Sheep and Fiddle used to be is now where there's a breakfast restaurant's located over there. Or I'm sorry, that might be where Pietanza's is located. Tipsy Monkey now is where the Indian Express is. So all of these have really been backfilled. Ambrosia is over where Smoking Pit used to be. And Platform 18, that's been Papa Pacino's and whatever's coming next, has also, at this point closed. But you see, for the most part, there hasn't been much turnover in it. So that's a good, thanks for bringing that up. And so for some of the ones that make, like Commissioner Smedilla mentioned, TLs, people don't really go there and say, hey, let's go to TLs and play video gambling. But they might gamble a little bit while they're waiting or while they're meeting somebody or whatever the case may be. So it's been taken as a big positive by all the business owners I've ever spoken with.
It's good to hear.
Yeah.
If there's no more discussion on the gambling revenue, the gaming revenues, we can move on to our next discussion. which would be a discussion on scheduling of our meetings. In the past few months, there have been a few inquiries as to what the village code is on meeting hours, when we have to meet, and whether there are any options available to meet at other times than second Mondays at 7 o'clock. So we can have an open discussion on it and get people's views and see what other options there may be. We're not necessarily going to take a motion tonight, but we're just going to discuss it and give people time to think about it, and we can resume discussing it again at the March meeting. So with that said, any thoughts on it?
Well, it's one evening a week or a month, and, I mean, I'm amenable to making changes as long as I think they're reasonable to accommodate, everybody's working schedules.
Yeah, let me ask you this, Tony, I know there's a lot of public interest in our meetings. Do we have to make it during a certain time?
We don't, no. We looked at, as Jerry said, a few of the commissioners had asked, really is what prompted this. And I went back to the old ordinances from 1980. The EDC was created in 1980. And then there was an amendment in 1999 that just talked about how it should structure with 9 people, and one should automatically be with the Chamber of Commerce and some other minor amendments. It just basically stated that it should meet periodically for the betterment of business retention and attraction to the village. Didn't even honestly say to meet once a month, but it's always been, I think, since 1980. Jerry, by the way, who was recently honored by the board for 40 years on the EDC, as far as I know, for the 15 years, it's been scheduled once a month. I think it's always been.
And just for the good of the record, Joey, Stephen, and I were not born in 1980.
Right, I was.
Wanted to mention that.
Thank you.
I'd like to see it moved up earlier. I've been on the board not nearly as long as many, but a number of years, and the board has changed a lot, the members, a lot of new members, and I am wondering if 7 o'clock is really on a Monday the preferred time. It has to be horrible for the 3 of you, because you start your day early and it becomes a very late night. And I don't know, personally, when I get home and come back out in the cold and the dark at 7 o'clock,
Well, here's where I'm going to throw a little wrinkle into this. This is a public agency, and our obligation is to the taxpayer. And I think anything earlier, I think.
at a different time, it would not have an effect on the taxpayer.
I actually think if we met at an earlier time, you might actually see members in the audience, because to Nan's point, they've come home from work, they've checked themselves in, they've had dinner, they've got kids to get ready, and they don't want to come back out either. So I think to Nan's point, I think that it is serving the public better to have an earlier time. And I do think that a time like 6 o'clock is an appropriate time. Most people get out of work at 5 or 5:30. It's easy to have people in a meeting by 6 o'clock. So to me, I think that you're better serving your public, putting them at a time that's reasonable with their commute.
Well, and with a commute, I would argue that for people getting on the train downtown at 5:40, they're not going to make a 6 p.m. meeting. So I think there are a lot of points to be discussed here. But again, remembering that we are a public agency, and if the village trustees are meeting at 7, I mean, is this appropriate for all commissions?
I mean, it's honestly, based on the memo that we looked at, and we looked at the bylaws, it's really up to you folks. It's not up to us. If you want to meet at 9 o'clock at night, I'll be here at 9 o'clock at night, and so will Tony. So as much as, I mean, what Nan said was very courteous, but
Well, according to
Up
the
to you
ordinance,
folks.
then it's up to the commissioners to decide when they want to meet. There's
it's
no
true.
specification in the ordinance saying it has to be within a certain time period or anything.
Yeah, it's up to you folks, really.
The village hall isn't even open at night.
Correct, and, exactly, and I think
Not
that,
like we're,
yep.
Yeah, I agree with Tracy, though, like, we should make ourselves available, that's why I asked the question if there's any rules. If somebody wants to come and contribute to this, they should be able to. Now, to your point, if you actually think there's a better time for that, that's fine.
We have heard, like, there are people, and like Commissioner Smadillo said, like, the board meets at 7 o'clock. We have had people that have said, oh, if it was at a different time. Now, whether or not that's true, we couldn't say.
Well, and I think.
couldn't.
Yeah, and I think the public that comes here, they come here with specific intent to discuss a business issue. So, when I think about, Manny Rafidia, is he going to argue about a 7 o'clock? I mean, for him, he's a businessman, and 7 PM meetings are.
Well, he'll argue about a lot, but actually, he would argue about it.
He meets with us a lot of times that he wants to meet at 8 o'clock
We're not-
before Village Hall opens most days.
He texted me a few minutes ago. So I understand.
Yeah.
But no, I mean,
So it sounds like what we're hearing, though, is like 5 o'clock, between 5 and 6 would definitely not work. Is that kind of what we're hearing? Because it's still pretty common that people work until 5:30. So if we want to still have people with the ability to get here, that 6 sounds like the earliest.
I don't think that's necessarily the case, though. I just think we have to be available at whatever that best time is.
Because I would say,
7, I'm good with any of it, by the way.
yeah, I mean, really, I can make any time work. Does it sound nice to sometimes be done a little earlier? Yes. I could say like we're not elected officials, so that's like where I would argue that, like, they'd better be at a time where anyone can get there. But I also do want to be available to anyone that might be interested in coming, so I guess it's just the whole time I've been here, I think we've had one or
People are saying 6, but is that what we're talking about, 7 to 6, or are you guys suggesting something much earlier?
I'm just bringing up that, and even the trustees, that's when they meet, we just continue to meet, but it's a lot of new people. Maybe that's not the preferred time. Maybe it is. It's just something that I think is worth having a discussion.
I mean, would we say mornings would never work? Is that,
And would it not work for everyone? I think it would work for some.
I mean, I like morning meetings, but like for me, like I couldn't do certain times because I have.
there are, and not to interrupt you, to put it into a global perspective, there's communities are very inconsistent. So if you want to report, well, what does this town do? Some are at 8. Some I've even seen, some board meetings are actually during the day. I don't know how they pull it off. Some are at 6, some are at 7, some are at 7:30. So certainly if you want a comparison, it really doesn't exist per se.
Well, so far, we've been talking basically about just moving it up a little bit. What if we consider the other end of the spectrum, like an early morning meeting versus an evening meeting? Say 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, would there be any interest in something like that?
My vote would always be for the taxpayer first, and an 8 or a 9 o'clock.
Exactly. And the taxpayer.
It doesn't matter, that we are available. That's the point, and I think that is a point of good transparency and good governance.
But we would still be here at a different time as well.
Absolutely, and they can still get their comments entered. It's not like somebody, if they had something to bring forward and they weren't able to come, it's not like they couldn't have it presented through the village. Additionally, the village staff is already there, so I think as you talk about taxpayers, I think being transparent to taxpayers, after sitting on a jury at Cook County all day today, I gotta tell you, transparency to your taxpayers, it's much more productive to be using your staff when they're already in their scheduled hours and there's already people in the building as opposed to additional hours. I like a 6 o'clock, but I'm not against exploring a daytime meeting as well once a month because they can still get their information in. The people that are generally coming are generally people who have an issue or something they want to present. It's part of their business. They're going to make it happen.
one suggestion that I may have is that you could all maybe email us your preferred times, and we could talk about what those times are and the pros and cons of them, and maybe bring them back to you for further discussion. Or if any, just a thought, it doesn't have to be solved tonight. Like I said, it's not up to us. I mean, if it was up to me, I mean, we work weekends, holidays, nights. It's not up to us. Like Commissioner Smadilla said, the taxpayer, and more importantly, in this particular setting, it's you folks. So it's up to you. I think we'll respect the taxpayer regardless of what time it is. We'll be here, like I said, if you wanted to move it back to 8 o'clock, we'll be here at 8 p.m. But certainly, we're open to suggestions. And like I said, it's up to you folks.
I mean, it's been a number of years at 7 o'clock, and I don't ever see anyone. So obviously, this isn't the best time for them either.
It could really engage some of your business owners, it could engage some of your restaurateurs to come in, and this would have been great information for them to see and think about and say to Tony, yeah, you know, you guys have talked to me about doing this stuff. I do need to be in that dining guide. I do have to update my stuff. I've got to send it over to you, you know, because once again, it's their business. We can't totally do everything for them. They have to own it, you know, and so I think it's a good way of giving them, this is what the village is trying to do for you, and inviting them to come during the course of the regular day. Or restaurateurs not going to be able to come at 7 o'clock at night, and most other ones that are owning some other type of business are checked in with their family, so it might be something to further explore.
Maybe we-
Change it back, I mean,
Yeah, no, absolutely, maybe we,
seems like it wouldn't be that hard of a transition.
maybe we say it's a trial period. That's always a good thing, too, that you say, you know what, we're going to transition and try for this many months, and then we'll see how it goes. We'll see how the feedback is. We'll see if there's more engagement. Because honestly, that's really what we want is more engagement. We want to hear more from them. We want to do more for them. But you can't when,
It would actually be nice to couple that with some plan to get more engagement, because
I was just gonna add, like, maybe if our goal is more engagement, maybe we need to have more action items, like maybe we need to have like a separate space where each of us take a month to actively like recap or talk about what's gonna, even when we get the agenda, here's what we're gonna be talking about, get it out like onto social. Maybe if that's our goal is more engagement, we have to be more active with it, not trying to figure out what time people are gonna come to us, but push out some messaging.
Well, and again, I think that, you know, going back to engagement, it seems like when we've had opportunities for public forums and discussions on, you know, specific items as it relates to more robust economic development, people will come out. I mean, they just need a real reason to. So unless you're a business owner that has business that should be going before the commission, the BETA grant applications are a great example of that. But again, more public forums, and yeah, if we're seeing it on, they want to engage, I mean, but we need to bring them into mindful discussion rather than simply posting on Facebook or on social media. But that's a great idea, Commissioner Gansey.
And any thoughts on what that mindful discussion might be, let us know. We're
Yeah,
happy
you
to
know,
implement
yeah,
it.
yeah, and I think publishing that. I think especially since, don't we have an update on Platform 18, or what is it called now, Bartlett app?
So we'll bring back options to you for further discussion. Is that what we're hearing?
absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Although it looks like our attendance has grown just since
it's really been, today's hot action.
Okay, like all the restaurants. Right, so I was the one that brought up just with the Bartlett tap, because I saw some messages online, people mentioning that wasn't there money given to them, and I just wanted all of us just to check. I think we all know what the situation is, but just so we have like a similar, the same message going out, so if anyone says anything online, we respond in the same way, so there aren't like extra rumors starting, like that money was given to them and that they took it all to Arizona or whatever.
Not to push Tony aside or monopolize the conversation, but I'd be happy to answer that. The money that was granted to the owner went toward code compliance fixing a fire suppression system for life safety issues, fixing a cooler system that was, I think, 100 years old, and fixing the facility to make it ADA accessible. Those components of the BETA grant that came from video gaming money, not directly out of a property tax bill, those expenditures will stay with that business. They won't be taken away. And I think it's a possibility, had we known that Mr. Castillo was going to close so quickly, we may have still recommended the BETA grant. And I'll tell you why. Because the number 2 call that Tony gets to his desk on a weekly basis from business owners and developers is, do you have a turnkey commercial kitchen available? Do you have a restaurant that's ready to go? And the answer for the last 5 years has been no. So when we pick up the phone now, in Mr. Castillo's absence, we will be able to answer, yes, we do have a restaurant available. Not only do we have one available, but we have one that just went through the building department several months ago for code compliance. So the expenditures that were given to Mr. Castillo for the BETA grant will remain with that business. So for us to be able to pick up the phone and say, yeah, not only do we have a restaurant that's ready to go, we have one right in the center of the downtown. So that's where we stand on the tap. We're not happy. That's the way it goes. It'll happen again. But we're working diligently to get a new owner in there that's committed to the restaurant business.
Did he,
The other reminder's got to be that if you're talking to somebody uninformed about this, that he lost a lot of money on this. He put in, I mean, it wasn't 100%, we just gave him money to fix this up and take a shot. What was it, 75% of the money, or?
He paid, what he turned in was expenditures of 126.5, I think, or no, it went over 132.
Yeah, so
It
it's
was like
still-
130,000, and we did 35,000 grant.
Yeah, I think it's important to make people know that we weren't just giving out money here. It was for important fixtures that we'll be able to use, and then, yeah, I don't know. I think that's key.
what is the disposition of the restaurant? I mean, just closing, I mean, is he marketing the business?
He's the owner of the business, but not the owner of the building. So at this point, Mr. Castillo on his own was out there seeking a buyer to purchase what his LLC, his business, Bartlett Tap LLC. Meanwhile, there's a building owner also who has lots of connections in the Chicago area and has some people looking. And then, of course, there's Scott and myself calling the people he was just referring to, who are out there thinking about doing a business, opening a restaurant, looking for the right location. It's a big thing, it's a big project to bite off for somebody, but for the right person, should be able to be very successful there for a very long time. So, of course, that's the type of operator that we're looking for and seeking. But just want to say, it's not just us looking. Mr. Castillo's trying to sell his business, and meanwhile, the owner of the building is an investor named Junior Anderson, and he's out there beating the bushes as well.
Thank you.
It's not an easy business to run.
There's
If you
nothing
don't have any
easy.
experience, it makes it even worse. So,
And I think that's where we might be a little better when we do these, make sure that they do have the experience and the plan, because he had a romantic vision, but this place is right by me. I went 10 times. Every single time it was poorly run, so.
It's my understanding he actually comes from a family of restaurateurs out of Indiana, correct?
It's true.
That's it.
It's
yeah.
true.
So,
There's something called sweat equity, and he had none of it. In terms of maintaining the operation, he had plenty of it when he was setting it up, and that got us excited, rightfully so. But when it comes to maintaining it, and you know what, people have lives, and he has other opportunities in other states that he's wanted to take a look at. So
Like you said, it was stuff that needs to be done in the building, so. it's-
yeah, actually, big fan of some of the things he did. It helps.
Yeah, all that money is still there in that building. That's the big piece of it. That's,
And quite frankly, whoever goes in there, once more is developed, will be making,
Contract?
We'll be making boatloads of money.
Anything in the Mexican restaurant? I heard that wasn't going as planned.
You mean at Streets of Bartlett? Well, again, that's a project where the owner of the center has been doing all the build-out himself. There's a lot of similarities of what we've been talking about with the restaurant business, where there was an operator in place earlier on who, for whatever reason, is no longer going to be the operator. However, Mr. Rafidia, it's a different story with him because he owns multiple shopping centers and he's been in the real estate and restaurant business probably for 30 years. He's been showing it. As a matter of fact, last Friday, two different operators came in to tour the facility. The restaurant itself is pretty much done, kind of ready to go. Much like we were talking about with Mr. Castilla and some of these other businesses, it behooves us all to have the right person in there, whether it takes an extra week or extra month, than to just put the first person in there who thinks they can do it. And again, Mr. Rafidia, he's another guy we work with 5 days a week now, so we're going to rely on some of his expertise and experience in getting the right person in there. But, so you heard right. Just about done, just need a real good operator to come in.
And if any of you folks want to walk through it and see it, please let us know. And that's true for any business, or if you have any questions.
How about the other outstanding BETA grants, like for the still, or and I apologize, I forget the name of the Indian.
Oh, I could update you on those. There was a really small BETA grant, $15,000 for Indian Express, close to a year ago. I think it was last May or June. And that's your quintessential, I would call it a mom and pop business, but it's just the pop. It's just it's a sole proprietorship. And what he presented was a budget of $75,000. And a lot of times here, we're talking with businesses that come in talking about $500,000 or millions of dollars with Mr. Rafidia, tens of millions in our business park. For him to be able to finance the $75,000 was like a major undertaking and didn't go quite as quickly and smoothly as he wanted. He still is working on it slowly, diligently, piece by piece. And I have probably checked on him every single month. And he tells me every month that next month he'll be done. But this is getting real close to the next month that he'll be done with that. In terms of the still, same story, where I can't sit here and tell you for sure they're going to do that expansion. They would like to. Can't share every detail of every meeting we have, but I would say we are still urging them to follow through with their expansion. But I don't think they're going to commence at any time in the extremely near future. I'm thinking if we have any other outstanding BETA grants, 120 Live, the board approved the $50,000 grant that we presented to you last month. And that has turned into just a massive, massive project. I can tell you that the numbers that we told you, that they bought it for X amount and then they were going to invest, I think it was $375,000. I'm just going to tell you that number has increased dramatically. But they are very close. They would like to be open. Obviously, they didn't open by Super Bowl, but they'd like to open next month. I think Scott also talks with them a real lot. But that's a space that you won't recognize when you walk in, when it's been converted to a restaurant. And I can't wait till the weather is nice, because he built just a beautiful, beautiful outdoor beer garden over there. that spans the interior and exterior of the building. So that's one, that'll be a happy BETA grant to deliver to Mr. Bowman. That'll be a very happy day.
Thanks for the update on those particular grants. I just want to redress the issue with the still and them delaying their project. At one point, we had discussed putting a timeline on the commencement of work for these grants so that we weren't holding funds for one particular business
Yes.
indefinitely. Did we actually write that particular policy note into the grant application process?
We didn't yet, but I'll answer that. So you know our village's fiscal year is May 1 through April 30th. Scott and I, and also the administrator, Paula Schumacher, we've talked quite a few times about tweaking and improving the BETA program. And I think one of the things we agreed to put in there is just a very hard one-year deadline. And you had brought that up a few months ago, where, look, if somebody comes in and it's a year seems like a long time and then it passes quickly, and somebody doesn't commence their project, I've reached out many times, Scott can verify, to the Indian grocery store and listen to every single reason why they couldn't do it. But, you know, one thing we don't want to do is make them come hat in hand again to repeat the whole thing that they're doing. If they're sincerely pursuing it and working on it. But what we don't want, as you alluded to, is somebody to come and apply and then just never take the next step whatsoever. And it's just floating out there. We have to close out our books at some point, like everybody does. And so that's, I think, the amendment we agreed to make is just a very hard, if you get approved by the village board June 1st, 2020, you got to be doing well on your way by June 1st, 2021. And really, I'm glad you brought that up tonight. Really, we want people to do like Mr. Rafidia or Jimmy Bowman or somebody who applies June 1st and then starts June 2nd. But in sometimes that's not the case for whatever reason. And it causes an accounting snafu, and we don't want to create those.
Well, and again, I think the BETA grant should be used as kind of, there should be that stick and carrot approach to it. It's like, this is, you know, an opportunity for you to mitigate some of the effects of your, you know, your build-outs or your improvements, but, you know, we're inviting you in, and we're glad you're here in the community, but we rely upon you being open because we're really anticipating the revenue stream that's going to be coming from taxes. So, again, I don't want us to,
Right, right.
you know, I don't want us to be hard-nosed about it, but there needs to be a reasonable expectation, not just that we want them to start sooner rather than later, but that they understand that this is truly a business proposition. There's really little that's altruistic about it.
Maybe we need to ask the question when anyone comes in, like, do you have funding in place for this? Like,
You know, and you bring up a great point, because I do remember that Mayor Wallace also brought up the issue of, you know, of bona fide business plans being attached to the BETA grants as well. So, you know, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing not just that business plan, but again, seeing if they have funding in place or.
Yeah, no, those are great points. We're glad you brought that up, and it just reminds me of something where you can meet with two different business people, and one of them could be like Mr. Castilla, for instance, and do a 30-page business plan and a really, really nice business plan. Mm-hmm. But you could have somebody else who might not be the best business plan writer or the best person to put their thoughts and plans in writing, but could be the person to do a successful business for 20 years. So, but, you know, that said, we do, when it's a new business, when it's a new entity, we do that as a practice now. We tell them, you know, we expect to see a business plan, even if it's like 2 or 3, like the business plan from 120 Live was a good business plan, but it's only like 3 pages.
Sure.
but it details their
Content, not,
experience.
the quality of the content,
Yeah,
not the
yeah, it's
quantity.
not something you would bring to Chase Bank for a loan, but, it's a good, solid plan they have, and relying on their experience. So I'm a little wary of that, too. The first time they wanted the business plan was because our very first grant recipient, you remember Indian Express? Talk about beat a grant to perfection. The guy applied, turned in every single piece of paper that we wanted, a great business plan. It's not like, hey, it's a permanent thing there, we know for decades, but he's been doing well, and he followed through and did everything he showed you he was going to do. So that was the first business plan, person that we asked to write one. So we'll continue to do that, but just keeping in mind that a well laid out business plan doesn't always convert to long-term business success.
So briefly, I just want to dovetail on something that Commissioner Gansey brought up with her concerns about Bartlett tap closing and what happens to those beta funds that were distributed. And it's nice to know that those were actually done or used for improvements that are going to stay with the building, which is great. So do we have anything in the grant application or the application process? And I think it was, perhaps an amendment was going to be, maybe it would be required, but where if somebody went out of business and they have applied for, so they've applied for the grant and they're going to be using it to buy, restaurant equipment, is there any mechanism within that would preclude an owner from selling assets out of the unit, that particularly if taxpayer funds were used?
At this point, there isn't. We talked about it a lot coming up with the program. One of the things the administration didn't want us to become collection agents, trying to track down people who moved to Arizona and suing them and trying to determine what their LLC is and what their personal assets are. So in an effort just to really get a program out there, when it was started 2 years ago, we didn't put all those caveats on it, like, fixture has to, it kind of detailed generally it's build-out expenses and here's what's available, build-out. These types of programs in general started as facade programs, really to beautify exteriors. When Bartlett had a downtown TIF district for many years, I used to present TIF rebates, but those rebates didn't include interior build-out, which was one of the big knocks on it, because all the other towns were offering, pretty much every other town was offering some type of incentive that included build-out. So we wanted to make something that kind of mimicked them. I based that program, I kind of wrote it up and based it off of what I thought were best practices. I included similar programs in Des Plaines and Mundelein as examples. And there were others, Elmhurst as well. And so none of them really had that mechanism. They were all similar in nature, to try to encourage more sales tax producing businesses and to include build out, signage, outdoor dining, things that we feel creates kind of a vibrant atmosphere. And also keeping in mind, I'm always thinking of downtown restaurants when I talk about BETA, but we wanted to make something village-wide that could be applicable in all the shopping centers as well.
And we spoke to one of the towns when we were devising the plans about a clawback revision. It's not unheard of, but spending village attorney money to go after, a booth or chairs, or granted, some of the kitchen equipment is very expensive, but taking that up in civil court, we've spoken to some other communities about it, and some said, but some still have it, so there's merit to it.
Well, even just having the language in may be a deterrent from them doing that.
Sure.
We will
Maybe
look
you can
into
say
that.
like something in there subject to whatever the court term is.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, that appears to end that discussion. Last item On the agenda would be adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
I'll third.
Aye.
Motion is adjourned, meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.